Okay, and that's key issues, very popular nowadays. And the dilemma is that every country would like to have some critical mass of technology, but at the same time, they can have everything in their own territory. That's the basic dilemma facing every country. So we'll see how each speaker in this session deal with this dilemma and concept. And luckily, we have Jacob Adler, who is actually one of the first scholars who proposed this concept in European context. He's from Fraunhofer, and executive director of the Fraunhofer Institute, okay, one of the key institutions in Germany. He's also professor at University of Manchester in UK. Okay. Then we have a scholar from US, Nicholas Bonotas. He is at George Washington University School of International Affairs. He is also globally known expert on technology and innovation policies. Okay, so he might present global and also American perspectives. Okay, then given these two speakers from abroad, we'll have Korean scholars, Sang-Wook Park from SNU in Department of Science Studies. It's one of the new interdisciplinary department in SNU. He's the expert on science and technology policy in Korea. Okay, so I think this is excellent setup in terms of composition of three speakers: Europe, US, and Korea. So we're expecting very exciting discussion and exchange of views. Okay, so we'll have a format of asking each speaker speak about 20 minutes or so. Then we'll have all sit together in front of this podium with a discussion. Hwang Ji-ho from Korea Institute of Science, Technology, Evaluation and Planning. Okay, so let's invite Jacob Adler as our first speakers. Okay, let's welcome him. Okay.
Hello again. Thank you very much, Kun Lee, for this nice introduction. And indeed, I had some expectations to this forum, but they were already exceeded with the first discussion this morning. I think you agree that we had a wonderful start, very, very rich. And I mean, I made so many notes, and there's so much to follow up. So what I will do is I won't give you anything on German policy. There might be the odd remark, but we haven't done any serious analysis of what's going on at the moment. But in the discussion, I can maybe give a bit of insight, but that's not the main talk. The main talk is to introduce a concept of technology sovereignty that we have developed. Henning Kroll is there, who was one of the co-authors, and we have 3 or 4 more co-authors. So it is a joint activity that we have done. So I will present this concept to you, and I will do it with a very classical kind of structure, starting with, of course, the motivation. Why did we actually do that? And I think when we listen to this morning, I think it's totally obvious why we did it, but I give you maybe the German context or the European context behind it. And then I go through the analytical steps of this concept, or the definition, analytical steps, what are the methods to actually try to capture technology sovereignty and understand your situation, what is it you want to do, and we've heard a lot of additional things. So we don't claim that this is the definite, finite article. That is what you have to do and to know, and then you know what to do in your country. That's not what this concept is about. The concept is about trying the first step to agree on a definition, or let's say to argue about a definition. Yesterday evening we had a dinner, and we already argued about the definition and what does it mean, and how should we bring it forward. But I think you are right, Kun Lee. We were a bit earlier than some others to discuss this and to bring this on the agenda. And what we now have to do is, of course, and we said that yesterday as well, also to bring the innovation studies people, on board. What does it actually mean for understanding innovation systems and the role of policy? It's far from trivial. The calls for technology sovereignty in Europe getting louder, and we said this 2 years ago, and they are now even louder. Now with the Ukraine war, things are tilting a little bit. It's now energy sovereignty and its resilience, and it's really a situation of real emergency across Europe. So this is not so much, technology sovereignty is not so much at the front any longer, but it's behind and many other things in terms of energy sovereignty. You need, of course, also technology sovereignty to be then sovereign in terms of energy. So the reasons for this growing uncertainty, they are on the slides, and they won't surprise you a bit, I guess. So the geopolitical uncertainties, and when I say geopolitical uncertainties, that was before the Russian assault on Ukraine. That was very much the Trump shock. I have to say that was a Trump shock, because all of a sudden 30, 40 years of relying on the US with all kinds of conflicts and criticism that we have on both sides, we could rely on the US in principle. And all of that was questioned. I don't want to judge it, but that was just the perception. It was questioned. So that was a big shock. And then Brexit shock. It came together. I was in the UK when Brexit happened. I left the UK after Brexit. There's a bit of causality there, but not 100%. But anyway, it was all of a sudden, things we took for granted, ever more integration, all of a sudden fall apart. That was a real, what do we do? What does that mean? And then the global trade conflicts, we know we have discussed it all morning. And then the COVID crisis, all of a sudden we realize, we are dependent on other countries for very, very minor things, for masks. We can't even develop our own masks because we lack some of that and some of that. So that of course broadened the picture even more, resilience, crises, how can we respond? And then the Ukraine war is clear, that's a new dimension. And then of course, even the very early discussions, there was an increasing conflict between this new thinking and the established economic model. And that was my personal motivation to do that. When I told that story to a couple of you already, with a colleague, I drove with a car in the morning to the institute, and they were discussing technology sovereignty on the radio, on the most important German radio station. And the discussion was so silly/dangerous that I thought we as an institute like Fraunhofer ISI, we have to do something about it. This discussion runs away, and then it's all about autonomy, and they are all foes out there, and we can't rely on anyone any longer, and we have to bring it all back. And so it was a very, very intense debate in the wrong direction. It was a bit of a dangerous debate. It was an important debate. We are not saying we don't take the concerns serious. We take them very serious, of course, as we all did this morning. But of course not in a way that is partly naive, partly interest-driven, and partly dangerous. Some might do that without realizing how dangerous this could be. So we thought, let's try to play our role as an institute that is maybe a bit ahead of the general debate, and let's develop a concept. That's all it is, not nothing more. But I was personally a little bit irritated by the kind of discussion we had in Germany. That was the reason. So we have to put this all into a context. So technology sovereignty is just a small piece of a bigger picture. We have to differentiate it. We cannot put everything into the basket of technology sovereignty. So we said, let's be a bit differentiated and delineate it from other concepts that have been mentioned. I think economic sovereignty and innovation sovereignty have been mentioned this morning, but it's not exactly the same thing. And then, of course, it's more than economic competitiveness. It's more than that. It has to do with what a society wants to do, what a state has to do, what are the sovereign tasks of a state. Defense. We have heard a lot about defense. So it's the economy, it's defense, but it's also health. It's also working against crises, provision of public services, transformation, all kinds of things you need technology. If you can't get access to technologies for a certain transformation you want to have, you have a real problem, a societal problem. So it's much more than the economic dimension only. And then we try to think about criteria. And that's maybe still by far the weakest point. I concede that. The criteria to determine the necessity and degree of technology sovereignty. Which technologies are critical in the sense that we need to take care of them, and how do we then measure the degree of criticality and the degree of dependency? It's all, of course, not simple questions. And then, of course, we want to try to come up with some recommendations. And that is now very important, and I come to the definition in a second. Because even yesterday evening, and Henning, I think maybe we even in our conversation about it, we may have a mistake. Not in using the term, we discussed it yesterday, but we did not maybe stress enough the interdependencies that we think are critical for technology sovereignty. It's not about doing it yourself. That's really important, but maybe the discussion even for us runs away a little bit because we think that's obvious, but it of course is not obvious. So it's now just a couple of impressions. I'm not going into detail, but for the European context that not all of you might be aware. There's a lot of talk about sovereignty that goes beyond technology sovereignty. But of course, it's always somehow mixed in the discussion. Fair enough, we need to discuss these things together, but we have to be very clear, what are we talking about? So strategic autonomy debate we had at the European level. So it's the ability to act and to choose one's own priority, make decisions and implement them on a very strategic level, beyond technology. And after the Trump election, this was something that in Europe was discussed. Macron had a big speech. Strategic sovereignty, that was Macron 2017. That's like strategic autonomy above. Strategic sovereignty was a bit more even for the European context. So a common political authority, do it together in Europe, so that EU states together can jointly the exercise that are necessary. They can jointly exercise the necessary powers. That has never really materialized in a new step of integration. But just to give you the idea what the sovereignty discourse meant, for some people it meant let's now do the last step in Europe, come together and really be an agent that can play the game with the Americans and with the Chinese on a higher level. And that is where technology sovereignty is part of, but of course that is much more, and all kinds of policy areas are now in the mix in our debate. So I don't want to link that now with our concept. That's not my point. My point is that there is a big discussion in Europe about all kinds of strategic levels. And as I said, we didn't go that way. That was politically not viable. Macron somehow didn't get any kind of echo, especially not from the German government. So that didn't really play. But the discourse is out there. And when I talk to people in Brussels, but also to political scientists, because I'm from that community, this is not really underpinned with any real concept. We don't really know what strategic sovereignty means in Europe. And then I don't go through this. It's just a more visual illustration of the kind of discourse we have in all kinds of countries, in international organizations. World Bank is here. We had a seminar on this topic. OECD, we had a seminar. European Commission is very strong in it. Various countries, and they all talk a little bit differently about it. But it's there. It's everywhere. Be it small countries, big countries. If you go for Germany, which is here, we have now a Council for Technology Sovereignty at the Ministry for Research and Education. So people is responsible for research and development policies and a part of innovation policies. They now have a council that advises them on what are the critical technologies, what are the risks, what are the dangers, or what the Korean deputy minister said about monitoring and trying to have a strategic intelligence about it. That is what this council also will do. And what they also do, and we have been beneficiaries, our institute now does the first study on technology sovereignty on one technology. So we apply this concept now for the German ministry in really big time, I would say. And then we had a science summit. That's the highest summit once a year. The chancellor was there. I was invited for 4 or 5 other people. And the headline was technology sovereignty. So that's the level of discussion that we had with it. It has been really hot. And now, of course, with the energy crisis, things have shifted again a little bit. So definition. That's our definition. I mean, it's out there now, the ability of a state. And we say of a federation of states. So because we think in European terms. And one of the speakers this morning said, well, Korea is different from Germany, most of all because we don't have this kind of integration into something that is similar to the European Union. We don't have this kind of safety net. And for us, it was very important. We don't define this nationally only. But that's a German situation. That's not the Korean situation, obviously. So the ability of a state or a federation of states to develop technologies, it deems critical for its welfare, competitiveness, and ability to act more generally. So it's not only about the economy, and it's not only about defense. And that's important, it's in green. Or source these from other economic areas without one-sided structural dependency. So that's the interdependency we want to see. So, of course, interdependency can go various ways. You know, we have to intermingle in ways that you can almost not disentangle any longer. Or you have a tit for tat. You say, well, I have this, you have that. Let's have a trustful relationship, and we have a give and take. So there are different ways of having interdependency, but it's very important. If you can source it from another source that is not reliable and where you have one-sided dependency, then you are not sovereign. You're permanently under the risk of someone pulling the plug. But that's why we mean without one-sided structural dependency. That's a very important part of that definition, and sometimes that seems to be forgotten. But that's maybe our main point, because the first 2 lines everybody agreed. Oh, I'm a bit too slow. So now that's what I said earlier, we have to differentiate. And of course, it's hard to differentiate because these things are not clearly to be differentiated. But innovation sovereignty is much closer to market. What does it need to take it into the marketplace? We have, in this state of our concept, it's more about the generation and the access to technology. but it needs more than just the access and the ability to create a technology in order to actually deliver it. So innovation sovereignty and even economic sovereignty are then broader concepts. And we said let's first focus on this, because if we go to economic sovereignty, then there are all kinds of other variables that come into play that are important, of course, and they are interlinked, but let's conceptually divide them. So what are the analytical questions? Criticality. Is a technology currently or in future indispensable? That's a critical question. And to what extent could access to it be threatened by external shocks? So how critical is technology? Now you can imagine what that means if you ask these questions to 15 economic sectors. 15 will say ours is very critical. So to define what are the choices, we've heard about choices and priorities that you have made, is of course a very important task that cannot be done by analysts alone that have some kind of nice modeling approach and then say this is that and this is that. It's also, of course, always a political matter as well. That's just life, but you have to ask the question. And for what political space should that be defined? That's, again, the German question. Is it something we define at European level? Is it something we define at national level? So that's a very important dimension we have added. And then what is the time scale? Are we talking about long term, where you can think of then building up the potential, the competencies almost in all kinds of technologies? Or are we talking about very short term, closing gaps? Or are we talking midterm? What does it mean in the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years? So time scale is really important. A reaction to immediate crisis is different from saying in 10 years we want to be able to do this somehow in our own space. That's important. And then in which functional context is the technology critical? And I come back to that here. So we just wanted to highlight, and I don't go into all of the details of this table, but we wanted to highlight it's not only about economic competitiveness. That doesn't work. Not only about competitiveness, it's also meeting needs of society and the sovereign task like defense, which is the main one. So that's maybe a bit artificial separation, but it is important for our debate. It's not about the economy only. And then it's static. What do we have now? And then, of course, what are the dynamic developments? Foresight comes into play. What are the kind of things we can expect, we should expect, we want to expect from our system? And then we can fill that. So these are the kinds of dimensions that you can look at. It's these three, the tasks, societal needs, it's by public services, critical infrastructure, public health care, and so on. And then being crisis-proof, that came, of course, in because of COVID. We realized, it's also about resilience. At this moment in time, you might be stable, but what happens if there is a crisis? Are we then also able to react, mobilizing technologies? And then this is about dynamic development. For example, sovereign tasks, informational self-determination. Can we do that in the future if we are relying on foreign technology? System transformation. Can we go in the right direction with the right speed, with the right technologies in the future? Or do we have the technologies and the capabilities for that? So these are the kinds of questions you can ask. One is more static, but more important maybe is the dynamic development that you see down there. So now a couple of analytical questions. Determining the degree of technological sovereignty. Now, these are the questions that we also already heard this morning, partly at least. Do we have our own competencies and resources? Do they already exist, or is there a possibility to develop them, to develop the necessary competencies and resources ourselves, if we need it? So do we have that? Should a crisis occur, or should we decide politically we want to go in a certain direction? Can we actually do that? Does access exist to resources, competencies, and upstream services of third parties? Do we have the access? Is that access trustful? Or do we have, and that's very important, do we have substitutes available? So if we have lost the race for certain technology and we are dependent, can we do things differently to achieve a certain goal with different kind of technologies? So technology sovereignty doesn't only mean you have to copy everyone else and be better because you don't have the access any longer. It can also mean you might create alternatives. So if you have constraints in all of this, if all of this is a no, then you have an issue. Then you have a real issue, a problem of technology sovereignty. If all of this is a no, if one of them is a clear yes and you can secure it, this may not be a focus of your technology sovereignty policy in the future. But these are the critical questions. Now, how would we analyze this? And as I said, we apply this, and of course, when we apply it, we always deviate a bit and we develop even further and so on. So that's very bit simplistic, maybe what you see here. But these are the kinds of things, and these are the kinds of things we do normally as scholars. So we haven't reinvented things, but maybe brought it together with a different focus So pattern analysis and other derived indicators on patents, profiles and so on, patent shares and specialization, bibliometric analysis to see a bit more the long run, where are our competencies and what are our specialities compared to others, and then where are complementarities to other countries. And yesterday evening you showed a nice chart, JD, already, where you did exactly that for patents. Then analysis of the contribution of individual countries to standards. We heard about standards, and it's a big concern in Germany that we are not active in standardization any longer. That might mean that we are not at the front end of certain technologies. It might mean that we have just forgotten how important standards are. And if Chinese are sitting in many of these committees with a lot of people, that might mean something for future markets and for future technologies. And are we part of that game? So, but it's part of the analysis. Where are we actually active in standard setting, and where do we play a part of that? And then we can analyze technology and resource-specific production statistics. What do we actually manufacture in what kind of areas, and where are we weak? And then export shares, technology-specific, of course. Dependence and access to competencies and resources, that's very important. So we look again at analysis of international standards and patents and open source. So what are our competencies compared to them elsewhere? Same true with trade balance, and that you can of course group by technology to see where are we actually strong, where are we weak, where are we falling behind. Complexity indices that just indicate the sophistication of your exports that you can have to of course to break it down. Time is running out, I know. International trade behavior, so that's very important, because when it comes to complementary partners elsewhere, you need to understand how trustworthy are those countries. What is their behavior in WTO? What is their export behavior, their trade behavior, and so on. So especially for raw materials, there might be a lot of countries out there now when we try to resource things, where we have to better understand what is actually what has been their behavior and how reliant are there, and what you can also do to look at governance indices and other things to understand systems better. Many countries do that, but I think we have to roll that out. Strategies, and I come to end very quickly, strategies for dealing with challenges. Strategic intelligence, I mean, we have heard about this. You want to create some monitoring device, strategic intelligence in Korea. I absolutely think that's absolutely needed. We have always done this. I mean, we had analysis of critical technologies for many years, but now it's more, I think it's more comprehensive. It's more about risk, it's more about resilience, it's more about redundancies, and are the complementaries and our relationships with others trustful. These kind of things are now much more in the center of the analysis. So we try to analyze criticality, and that is of course not simple, because as I said, and that's a big issue for me, that this term has now been captured by political economy. It's now captured by sectors who all raise their hands for getting subsidies. But we also need to provide the competencies to actually do that. One exercise here, one exercise there might not do it. We need maybe more monitoring exercise. So the Technology Council in Germany and the activities of an institute like ours are important, but I'm not sure if in the future that is enough. And as I said, we have to think that at European level, not only at German level. So these strategies are pretty straightforward on the basis, of course, of analysis. Investment in research and development, that is absolutely critical. And I know Korea has had a huge investment in R&D, and in that sense, it doesn't start from a low level, but it's absolutely critical, research and development. The question, of course, is how you do that. International research cooperation, that is now more important than ever, and we have learned we may end up with two systems. We all regret it. We may end up, but even within the system we might end up with, we need more proactive strategies to actually define and design those cooperations. I really think this is much more important than it used to be. In Europe, we are fine, roughly within Europe, but Europe and the outside world, I'm not so sure at all. So whatever we can do to support more strategic international cooperation, we were happy to do that. Actively influencing standards, of course, because the standards today are the markets for tomorrow, and if you are part of that, then you safeguard yourself in a certain technology, of course. Regulatory framework conditions in your own country must be favorable to the technologies that you think are critical in order to make it better, make it more easier and better for companies to invest in your country for those technologies. Promoting innovation or in procurement is of course a tricky one. You can do it in ways that you make sure that these things are actually also manufactured in Germany or Europe. But of course, we have WTO, we have GATT, we have all of this. We have to be careful how that can be done. But procurement can be used much more intelligently for these kind of things. I just don't understand why this always comes under the radar. DARPA is always mentioned as the leading light, and other countries are just not able to do it, and I just don't know why that is. I really don't know why that is, because in terms of regulation, it is possible even in Europe to do a DARPA kind of approach, and we just don't get it off the ground. And then, of course, rules-based international trade. We have heard this morning that there is some criticism that they are dying. Someone said they are dying. They are not. We have to, and if they are dying, we need some other rules-based international organization. I'm not quite sure what the alternative would be. What might it mean for small, developing, catching-up countries? This is a slide that came in late because of the experience I had with the World Bank seminar that we gave. Similar kind of things, but there's, of course, more dependency. And we've heard it this morning as well, understanding the relative position in value chains is extremely important. You know, how critical is our contribution, and how can we make sure that we are a trustful partner? I think that's absolutely important. Then at some point there will be positioning in the geopolitical situation. I'm afraid that is maybe the direction of travel, which is of course not what we all want to see. Investing in technological capabilities, that's obvious. And then complement innovation and industrial policy. You know, be very clear what is our role internationally, and what is our industrial policy to support that role in a trustful manner. This is of course very shaky. We know that in the last 10 years, the number of autocracies has risen, the number of democracies has gone down. So what is international trust? What is long-term, mid-term trust in other systems? That's really an issue of real concern, but we have to try. Conclusion, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So if the message is, you know, we have to do it all ourselves, then it's the wrong message. We have to be very clear that the efficiency of the global or of a broad transnational integration of technology development are enormous. We've seen it with one disruption and we see what's happening. So this is extremely important that we do this in a very cautious, integrative, open, transparent way. We should. So I think it is absolutely legitimate to think along those lines, but we have to do it in much more intelligent ways, and try to set up a monitoring system that is worth its name. So with that, I would like to finish. It was a bit of a quick run through the concept. Again, I want to say this is not the final product. It's just a contribution for the debate on this topic. Thank you very much.
Excellent presentation. It's rare opportunity for us to listen to the view on this sovereignty by the original scholars who proposed this concept first in the world, I guess. Okay, but as you know, I heard this Adler's talk last year about similar topic, but I noticed that this concept is keep evolving and modified and changed. So it's bringing a lot of debate and reaction. So in the context, Nicolas Bonotas will present his view. Okay, yeah. Let's welcome him.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Lee and Professor Lee. Jeong-Dong Lee for inviting me here, Professor Lee for introducing. Thanks everybody in this meeting. If anything, coming here from the United States was useful for me to learn that many other people have similar concerns. When Professor Lee, my friend JD, invited me in this meeting, I actually thought a little bit about it. I looked at the title, sovereignty. I kind of felt a little bit insecure, and I asked him for a favor. Could you allow me to take a critical view of this, just for the sake of discussion? The truth of the matter is that I have preached globalization for decades now, and I'm not about to give it up. because of technological sovereignty. So what I will do, I will take a very quick, I will take you around like a true professor, several slides. I will take you around to some of the arguments and see where they might stand, where they might fall, and primarily from the US point of view, because that's what I know a little bit better. Of course, Bill did a masterful job in the morning. He explained everything about the policy, so I will explain why this policy may have a few problems in terms of implementation. So this is actually the questions that I raised. There are five issues that I want to discuss here. What I noticed in the morning is that everybody is comfortable with all other countries choosing technologies and choosing critical technologies and whatever industries, but they are not comfortable with the United States doing that. It is actually the turn of the United States that shocks people. It's not that it is the only country, because Korea does it, China does it, Europe does it. Even the United States has been doing it for some technology, of course, military and outside of the defense sometimes. So the first thing is that what is happening in the United States seems to me to be against the long-term principles. And that means that our system may not be geared up for this, to implement it well. Second, I don't think we have very clear objectives here, and I will show you what I mean by very clear objectives. Third, it goes against some well-established principles of economic competitiveness. We have worked a lot on this, and I will take you back to some definitions. Four, which is very critical for me, it seems that we may be dismantling an international system that we have preached, and that comes with some consequences. And five, I'm not sure that everybody is reading history very well. Lessons that we have gotten from previous eras were similar, not exactly the same, but fairly overlapping situations existed. These are the core principles of US policy. They have been long-term. First, basic research is a public good, so we fund it publicly. Great. Second, the agencies, the ministries, that is, pursue missions. None of these missions is technology. Okay? But the United States does not have an agency for technology. Many agencies pursue technology, but they pursue technology in order to achieve a mission. That is not technology, it's something else. Maybe health, maybe the veterans, maybe the environment, maybe energy, but it's not technology per se, right? So there is no mission for technology in the United States traditionally. I mean, third, we do not pick winners really. We haven't. We have selectively here and there, you know, when some companies tended to fail and so forth, but the picking winners is not something that the system understood before very much, outside of the defense area, of course, as Bill was saying. And finally, that doesn't mean that there is no role for the government. In fact, the government has a very critical role for regulations, for making sure that the game is fair, for keeping up international relations and so forth. So this seems to me, and they're not really mine, these were listed in earlier years by somebody that some of you, the older ones, may remember from the literature, Lou Branscombe, a very important person in our field. This is the system, and the only reason I show it to you is that most of the policies that Bill was talking about today actually came from the right-hand side, from Congress. These are the elected officials, and they pushed these policies forward. And the president now is more receptive, and he has been signing off on them. Now, you will see the red numbers in front of the slides. This means which of the 5 issues I deal with. So we are on the second here. What are the objectives? The objectives may not be very, very clear, because until we set our objectives clear, we don't know what policy to follow, right? Is it that we have large trade deficit? Is that the objective? Is that the problem? The US is running big trade deficits. Is this the big problem? Is it that we want to boost international competitiveness? We think we are not competitive, and that's what we are trying to do. Is it that we are bothered that other countries are growing faster and they might actually gain supremacy internationally? Is it a global value system, value chain problem? Do we think that these have proliferated very much and they have obfuscated actually the policy system? They have created complications that are a problem. Is it that foreign governments play unfairly? Are we here to punish someone because we cannot get them otherwise, we punish them this way? Or everything, all of the above, right? So let's look at the policy as it looks right now for semiconductors. So this is basically, and this came out in a recent seminar that my university, actually the school, ran. Very good one. I strongly recommend that you see it. A 2-hour thing with very good people, 2 Koreans, two Americans discussing on semiconductors. This is one of the Americans, Shahid Yusuf. Actually, he was former World Bank, and now he is at the business school there. So the policy for semiconductors in the United States can be summarized this way, more or less, right? I think it's correct. We want to reshore good parts of the value chain, right, of the manufacturing. We want to also think very, 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 very carefully about critical operations and supplies. Right, as the second bullet says. That will relate to those regional hubs that Bill was mentioning early on. We want to monitor supply chains. We want to really be careful with the global supply chains in this, because it is critical. We want to boost up our skills. We want to support research, right? And most of the research is in the private sector. We want to combine trade with industrial policy to mesh them together. But in this we collaborate, right? We want to collaborate. We would like to collaborate. And we want, the last one was just mentioned, is about procurement. We want to make sure that there is demand for these things so that the companies invest. And we will use other policies to boost demand, right? So this is a very long list. A very long list of things that maybe can be done, maybe not, may not be able done. But this is basically the way I understand, like Shahid there, I understand what we are trying to do in semiconductors with all these policies. So let me go back to our objectives, right? So what are we doing? What is this? Here is I will show you some pictures very quickly that some of you may know them. It's from the National Science Foundation, Science and Engineering Indicators. The United States spends a lot on R&D. It's not that we have fallen behind in R&D. A lot, much more than many other countries. Are we falling behind in R&D expenditures? Not really. I mean, if you look over the years, the United States, North America, and primarily the United States, is at the bottom with the purple there. It's okay. I mean, we are doing fine. Not a problem, not a big problem. Are we, the way we spend the R&D expenditures, we don't have much of a problem. The China is increasing much faster, but that's okay. I mean, okay, we are increasing too, right? I don't see much of a problem here. Do we have a problem with knowledge and technology intensive industries, KTIs? This is high and medium tech, high, medium, high, right? Technology industries. Well, we look around the world, because it is high and medium high, Germany looks very strong here, right, with automobiles and so forth, but the United States is okay. I mean, if you took only high, the United States would look relatively better, right, here, but to me, it doesn't look like a huge problem. Do we have, in terms of a manufacturing value added here, how do we look? Here it looks like another country is increasing. We are losing share, but global share, not really that we are going backwards in any other sense, right? So this is a share. Of course, others are growing. This other country is growing faster. So our share is dropping, but we are not losing really in absolute terms. Country share of global KTI manufacturing value added by different industries. You see the different industries. The US is dark blue. China is the light blue there. There you see China is doing, I mean, as you go from the top to the bottom, they are really progressing pretty well. Fine. They are doing pretty good. When you turn into services, however, here is we are going into services. Clearly, the US is playing at a different level, right, than anybody else. So if our economies are very much dependent on services, KTI services, the US is very different from anybody else. You see these services in this graph, IT and other information services, software publishing, scientific research and development, the US, the dark blue. Not bad, not bad. I wouldn't say that we are looking at a disaster here. I would say that the country with the light blue is doing very well, is also progressing. Good for them. I don't have a problem. Good for them. But we are okay. In my view, right? Now, here is starting to become, the picture starts becoming a little bit worrisome. This other country, China, right, is increasing very fast. We are not dropping in any, but not so fast increase, right? You see the graph with the exports and the different, the way they have evolved through time, 2002, 2010, 2018. This other country, China, is of course ramping up. We know this very fast. The United States, the share has dropping, but okay. We say that here, perhaps in the exports and the imports, then this is shocking most people, most policy decision makers in the United States. This graph, look at the United States, the dark blue is really creating huge trade deficits, right? And these are in knowledge and technology intensive industries, right? So that's the great, all right. So many years ago that most of you will not remember, some other president, President Reagan, in the mid-'80s, when we had the problem with Japan, put together a very prominent committee, actually, very, very good people, very good economists and others, and they really defined competitiveness. What the hell is competitiveness? When I am thinking about competitiveness, what do I think? This is the definition. Right? The definition, and it says, if you look at the top, under free and fair market conditions, so that is important, that nobody plays unfairly, this country can produce goods and services that can meet the international market, that can be successful internationally. One, right? At the national level, then this is shown by superior productivity. So productivity is the critical thing. And also in the second line there in the middle, the ability of the country to shift output to high productivity activities. In other words, this is not a static picture. It evolves through time. And if you are going into higher and higher value added goods, you are doing well, right? This is the trick. Increase your productivity and go to higher value added activities as you move on. And competitiveness then at the bottom is rising living standards, right? Expanding employment opportunities and maintain international obligations. In other words, don't go bankrupt. Last sentence there, it is not just a measure of the nation's ability to sell abroad and to maintain a trade equilibrium. Very clear. So trade and the way you measure trade is not really the most critical factor. In other words, it says here, okay, trade deficits, but the trade deficits need to be seen in some context. So important, no need to read all this, I have put it in black. Compete internationally, look at goods and services, not just goods, goods and services, look at productivity and look at structural adjustment and the way to go to continuously go to higher value added activities, right? Okay, so this says the same. Let's go to number 4, right? Number 4 is about these JVCs, these global value chains. There has been a problem more recently. You see the middle paragraph there, supply chain fragility, cybersecurity issues that we have very critical in the United States, COVID and all this. They have shaken our confidence in this thing. So we have started talking about resilience. In other words, what the previous presenters here talked about, risk management. That's a resilience, risk management. So the White House is creating all sorts of efforts like this one in this report, and we heard something else earlier, conferences and all this, to actually examine this critical global value chains, the value chains, and here you have the different ministries, no need for you to read, but it's like semiconductors, it's batteries, it is minerals and materials, it is pharmaceuticals, and the function is given to different agencies, right, for different industries to examine what's going on internationally and advise the government. So the problem is here with JVCs, we know there is an issue, right? They have been set up on the basis of classic economic arguments of efficiency, as we heard before here in this podium, and now we understand that that is part of the equation. The other part is risk management, right? Resiliency, in other words. But how to achieve this is highly controversial in the United States, highly. And if you want to see the controversy, go to that seminar that I told you at GW with the 2 Koreans and the 2 Americans about semiconductors. So, for example, there are people like the one that I mentioned there, Lisa Porter, who was a very high official in the Department of Defense, actually, in the previous administration, who advocates that all this can be resolved by standards and the way we design our products. So as Jakob was just saying, stressing standards, to her, in her opinion, and the point that she's pushing forward is design on zero trust basis. In other words, you don't design a system to be secure. You design a system where you assume there is zero trust, and you manage, the system will be designed to manage risk, right? Okay, very good. So this is highly controversial, how to manage this. we have to think about. And then we go to other reports like this one, right? The World Development Report 2020. Just look at what they were saying for JVCs. JVCs can continue to boost growth, get better jobs, reduce poverty, whatever, provided that developing countries undertake deeper reforms, okay, and industrial countries pursue open, predictable policies. That's exactly what we are dismantling now. Open, predictable policies. There is no open, predictable policies now. We are making it very obscure. So other international organizations like the Asian Development Bank here actually push some points that are very valid. The trade statistics are outdated. Completely outdated, right? So what we measure with the trade is not really what's happening. Few people understand that what Apple sells in China is not measured by trade statistics. So Apple is making money in China. Apple is an American company. We don't actually count this. It sells services, right? Our trade, the way we measure trade, and this is important because the big argument here is that in trade we are doing terribly bad. We are sinking, right? So these people with this running this study say that look, I mean, we need to perhaps fix something else. The world looks very different here. So the integration of services in JVCs and what that means is terribly underrepresented in our statistics. And the point is that that's exactly where the United States is doing well. That's the point here, that the trade statistics, the way they are, do not measure appropriately the strengths of the country. Right? But these things are being missed around. So if we actually intervene and start dismantling and change this international investment and so forth, if we do it in a very clumsy way, what will happen is that the country is going to have a terrible cost at the end, which means it's losing its credibility. So the country itself, because it pushed the system for decades, that now suddenly it wants to dismantle. And that is not very good for public relations, right? So fifth, my last point, is this the first time that we are seeing something like this? Of course not. Huh? You go back to the books, you see how many other times. Excellent old article by Nelson and Wright describing the old situation. The first time we saw it, with Great Britain, Germany, and the US on the other side. But there was a more recent one, where I showed you the competitiveness definition from. And in that case, Congress got alarmed. It did do a lot of things. You know kinds of things? These kinds of things it did. Very good pieces of legislation that up to date they work and they are being emulated all over the world. Right? Beautiful pieces of art. None of them is interventionist in the way that the new policies are. So basically, if you go down this list, you will see that these are policies that are trying to create what that definition of competitiveness said we want to create. We want to actually push knowledge. We want to have it more efficient out of the universities. We want to increase productivity. We want to increase skills and so forth. It's not dismantle a system, right? I will finish soon. So these are the three pieces of bundles of legislation that went through. Pay attention to the fact that the first two, Bill, correct me if it is, I mean, I don't know, you know better, but it seems to me that the first two are bipartisan. And these are the more traditional American kind of issues. That the third one, where most people have problems, is partisan. This is the only one, the third one, where all this discussion is arising around the world, is actually from the Democratic Party. right? So there are political reasons behind it. I don't criticize the party or whoever, right? But it's important to know that this is it was not supported by part of Congress. So this is the one. Here is the conclusion of Bill. Bill wrote this conclusion, not me. Now the U.S. policy is changing, and I want dramatically because of this, and I want to end up with this. Is this really the change in policy? Is it a long-term? Somebody raised that question. Is this a long-term objective to change the policy, or the long-term objective would be? This is a short-term reaction, short to medium-term perhaps. The long-term reaction should be to actually modify the international system that should support the global activity, but in a different basis. Different international organizations. Not like the ones that have no teeth. And actually, the gentleman there, Edler, Jacob is coming from an area that has been running an experiment all these years, Jacob, right? For decades, Europe is running an experiment. And if there is one lesson from this experiment that is relevant to this discussion is that any place where economies mingle very much needs to must have strong rules. And it seems to me that what we are lacking internationally are strong rules. It's not a market. Economies always knew, right? Nobel markets are based on rules. It's not play freely like this. Property rights, right? Who owns what? And who acts how? And this internationally has been missing. And I think this is the long-term objective. Thank you.
Yes, I think we are getting very exciting stage of debate. Thank you, Nick, for raising important 5 points of discussion issues, which will further stimulate our discussion in this session. Okay. So then let me finally invite Professor Park from SNU, Park Sang-wook. Maybe he keep taking from Korean perspective on this important debate on concept of technological sovereignty. Okay, Professor Park. Okay.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm very delighted to be part of this so far fascinating seminar. And also I feel honored to present following to 2 distinguished scholars who I admire a lot. I'll be talking about technological sovereignty and the mission-oriented policy in Korea. I'm trying to link 2 concepts, the MOIP and technological sovereignty together through the Korean context and ongoing phenomenon. Where technology sovereignty and MOIP, 2 concepts are already used in official papers of Korean government. So this is ongoing fact, not a conceptualization only. Okay, so I'll make it very briefly to save time. Okay, this is the summary. Technological sovereignty obviously becomes to matter in Korea, sandwiched between 2 large blocks, US and China, and the global supply chain restructuring. And Japan hit the back of the Korea by trade restrictions. And that did a big shock to Korean people, not only large firms like Samsung, LG, or Hyundai, but also to general public of Korea. So technology sovereignty became a very popular and hot issue here. And the new Yoon administration, new presidents, Yoon administration has put the MOIP approach forward very forward to every science, technology, innovation, and industrial policies. So now we cannot say anything other than missions. So everything should be in missions. So I'd like to claim that Korea's response to Japan's export restriction has already showed an example of the MOIP approach, mission-oriented innovation policy, and that mission is to respond to the challenge of technological sovereignty crisis. This is the concept of the new MOIP suggested by Mariana Mazzucato. Mazzucato originally told that this is new because she wanted to tell her MOIP concept from the old style mission-oriented policies like Apollo missions or Manhattan Project, something like that. So the new MOIP, so-called new MOIP, emphasizes the grand challenges the humankind confronting, like climate change or sustainable development goals, etc. And then there is a top-down approach to set up the clearly described targeted missions. And then there is another approach from the bottom-up approach of the mission project, portfolios, R&Ds, activities, regulations, campaigns, etc., etc. And well, this looks very cool because Mazzucato also emphasizes the civil participation, co-production of knowledge and innovation, and so on and so on. And well, it became a hit to innovation studies community in the world. So Mazzucato and her colleagues have developed this concept further on, and then this kind of taxonomy of mission-oriented approach has suggested. Mode 1 is the old style catching up and socioeconomic missions. And mode 2 is the old style mission-oriented policies for defense or aerospace development. And the mode 3 is the new one to respond to grand challenges like climate change. So there's somewhat like a transformative innovation policy approach. So there should be geography of the MOIP. US, as Nick already told and Bill also told this morning, US has long tradition and legacy of the mode 2, defense-oriented or defense-originated approach of the MOP. And the UK and Europe are becoming more and more go to the mode 3 for grand challenges. And Germany, maybe Germany mode 1 plus mode 3 because Germany is part of the Europe. And Korea and Japan are clearly seen as they are very acquainted to the mode 1 mission-oriented approach. So this is not new to Korea. Mission-oriented innovation policy is never new to Korea. However, although the new MOIP concept and the revived mission-oriented policies have gained a big popularity around the world, nowadays there arise some criticisms to the MOIP. The first critic is the new MOIP revived legacy MOPs. So the government wants to do anything under the name of the MOIP because everything can be missions from the government perspective. The return of old traditional MOP approach now perfectly matches to the nation-centric politics. So every country wants to be nation-centric. Domesticization of the manufacturing value chains, making jobs, improving welfare for their own people, not the people in the world. And the spectra of missions are too broad, so everything can be mission. And the conceptualization is still confusing. And innovation policy nowadays are becomes more and more comprehensive, including science policy, technology policy, innovation policy, industrial policy, or even many of microeconomic policies. However, a comprehensive innovation policy may become a comprehensive toolkit for the government. So the government now can mix up many policy instruments to do the missions. So if the MOIP approach meets authoritarian government or a government which has a tradition or legacy of authoritarian approach, that can be somewhat dangerous. And the new MOIP, as Matkot said, the effective civil participation, I think it is very hyped and not very realistic. So in consequence, the MOIP approach should be and tend to be very technocratic. So they do what they want to do under the name of the MOIP. It's not my words. It's from Ed Steinmüller of the SPRU. Recently told me that the SPRU now is very against the MOIP approach. Yeah. Professor Kunli was together with me at the moment. So the missions to Korean government or Korea, there are a variety of missions, from economic missions to grand challenges. And the third one, this part is what I'd like to emphasize in this presentation. Missions to secure technology sovereignty. Global supply chain restructuring, which has been led by the US under the so-called the situation of tech Cold War between the US and China. Innovation and Competition Act, IRA, CHIPS Act, etc., as Nick told very early. And we have learned a lot of the lessons from those crises. Japan's export restriction on semiconductor materials and urea solution crisis. Our Deputy Vice Minister told about urea solution crisis this morning, and also COVID vaccines. Unlike the US or the Germany, Korea did not develop its own COVID vaccine. We don't have Pfizer, we don't have BioNTech, we don't have Moderna. So the capability to develop COVID vaccine is kind of a shock. That capability Korea is lacking, because biopharmaceutical industry is strongly based on science, basic science, but Korea did not do the basic science before 2000. So it is very early stage of the bioscience in Korea. So we couldn't develop Korean vaccine. So that thing, the lack of the COVID vaccine capability also implies the issue of technology sovereignty. Okay, this is the case. The strong trigger is the Japan's export restriction. In old days, maybe not very old, just several years ago, Korea's high-tech industry, such as semiconductor, OLED display, and secondary batteries, have long been depending on Japanese suppliers for high-tech materials, components, and instruments and equipment. And while Korean companies depended on China for minerals like lithium minerals, raw materials, and cheap chemicals. This is not we can make it or we cannot make it thing, because this is kind of regional division of labor. And 3 countries, China, Korea, and Japan, have been doing it very well. However, Japan hit back of the Korea all of a sudden due to very political reason. Because Korean court, not the government, administration government, Korean court made a decision about the compensation of the Second World War labor thing. And then Japanese government, METI, did this attack as a revenge. So Korean people were very upset, wow, this is kind of a pinpoint surgical attack to Korean high-tech industry. Among the restrictions, there was 3 key materials, critical materials: fluorine polyimide, this is for the flat panel displays, and photoresist for semiconductors, and high purity hydrogen fluoride gas for etching also semiconductors. Well, Korean companies or Korean semiconductor sector might have developed those. However, Japanese firms were very good at making quality materials in a very reasonable price. So why did we need to develop those materials by ourselves? However, this kind of restriction certainly made Korean firms make those materials by themselves. So it is obvious that this incident was a threat to Korea's technology sovereignty, which is by definition, according to Professor Adler here, happy to have him here, the ability of a state to provide the technologies it deems critical for its warfare competitiveness and ability to act, and to be able to develop these or source them from other economic areas without one-sided structural dependency. So the Japanese trade restriction revealed a case of the one-sided structural dependency and its vulnerability. Well, it's gone. So Korean government made actions, immediate actions, or spending a lot of money to SMEs to promote their R&D, to develop these materials to substitute Japanese imports, and then followed by more comprehensive actions, such as these amendments to the Special Act on the materials, components, and equipment. This is legislation, also policies, combining all the innovation policy instruments such as R&D, human resource development, test bed, cluster finance, and regulatory exemption to promote the import substitution. And also launch of the materials, components, equipment competitiveness committee under the government. And followed by Ministry of Science and ICT's actions on R&D investment. Korean government spending of R&D suddenly increased by 20% in 1 year after this crisis. It's kind of a shock. However, at the first stage, Korean R&D approach was somewhat defensive and catching up like approach. But later, Korean government became ambitious because it became confident that we can follow up Japanese materials, and then we can reach kind of independence of materials. So the latest policy says the Korean government targets very challenging target to lead the materials industry, something like that. And you know, Korean government ministries have a very fragmented governance structure on innovation and industry, but this is the exception. Against the foreign enemy, Korean government worked together, surprisingly. Under the Ministry of Economy and Finance leading, the related ministries come together, sit together, and then work together to overcome this crisis of technology sovereignty. So this is the last slide. It was the Japanese attack. It was perceived as an attack. It's not a war, however, attack. It became very politicized. There occurred the elevation effect with nationalism and historic anti-Japan mood, because Korea has suffered Japanese colonialization for 40 years. I think it is very dangerous when technology sovereignty discussion meets nationalism, and also a country like Korea, which has a strong authoritarian legacy. So this is the slogan: the materials, components, and equipment independence against Japan. It has triggered technology nationalism and opened up technology sovereignty discussions, which has been strengthened by the US pressure on Korea to behave as an ally. Do not rely on China. You are mine, something like that. So IRA hit the Korean automobile industry, Hyundai Motor Company, electric vehicles, semiconductor industry also need to prepare for making their global value chain restructured and so on and so on. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 pandemic also intensified this issue. I already told that. So as a conclusion, in my word, quite possibly, Korea is one of the most fragile states in terms of technology sovereignty. Or, and in other words, at least, Korea is a country that desires technology sovereignty most, because we are sandwiched between two blocks and forced to select one, not two. We cannot have two countries. We can just have one ally. So nowadays in Korea, the meaning of alliance has been broadening. Old days, alliance is only for security and defense, but nowadays, economic alliance and science and technology alliance, and so on. However, the manner of this MOIP in Korea is never strange to Koreans, because in old days, 70s, 80s, Korean people and Korean government was very acquainted to import substitution, industrialization. So as Nick just told at the last presentation, old bottle in a new wine, old wine in a new bottle, sorry, old manner in a new policy packaging. So probably the MOIP is what Korea has long been doing, okay? So we are very good at mission-oriented approaches. That's my conclusion. Thank you very much.
Okay. So remaining about 30 to 40 minutes, we're going to have a discussion. But before that, let me ask first our designated discussant, Dr. Hwang Ji-ho from KISTEP, to raise his comment first. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Lee. My name is Ji-ho Hwang from KISTEP. In session 2 in this afternoon, the three professors presented the concept and importance of TS. and the policy prescriptions of each countries. Maybe Professor Bonortas do not agree with that, but and also they expressed some suggestions on them. Professor Adler explained about the definition, analysis method, and strategy on TS, technology sovereignty. Professor Bonortas pointed out the basic meaning, general meaning that we have shared globally about the national science and technology policy, industrial policy, national competitiveness, industrial competitiveness, and GVC. And he added some risk lurking in the recent series of US government's actions related to technological hegemony and technological sovereignty. And Professor Park explained MOIP and also introduced the recent case of Japan's export restriction to Korea and the response of the Korean government. But now I still have some questions. So firstly, I would like to ask 3 questions to presenters right now. First one, how long will this kind of competition for technology hegemony last? And first, what is the reason? And second, what are the stable and sustainable directions for TS and economic security that many countries can share in the future? And the third one is this international forum is held in Korea, in Seoul, Korea. So I would like to hear your advice on how to respond to Korea at this time. That's last question.
The third question.
Yeah, your advice, how Korea respond to this TS like that. And many countries are embodying national level strategies to secure an edge in this competition for technology hegemony by prioritizing their national interest. Each country selects critical technologies to concentrate its national capability, such as research and infrastructure support, and materialize its supply chain, economic and security strategies centering on technology. I mean, in the era of tech politics, where technology is placed at the center of international order, that leads to rapid economic and technology security. Many countries are urgently responding to 2 things in common to establish TS. Firstly, securing irreplaceable critical technology. Secondly, joining a blocked limited alliance that cooperates with the leading countries or allies to secure manufacturing capacity and supply chains, or using them as leverage for future negotiation. While strengthening solidarity among solid allies, potentially dangerous countries are thoroughly excluded. And the countries that do not have competitive critical technology may also be excluded. The United States, a representative hegemon, is pursuing strategies to stabilize its domestic supply chain and maintain technological superiority through the CHIPS and Science Act, the IRA, the Chip4 Alliance, and the launch of IPEF. In conclusion, in the era of tech politics, countries that have a critical global supply chain alliance are advantageous in securing technology, TS, and economic security. They can also balance of power. They can also exercise diplomatic power as the mediator, like a casting vote in the balance of power between great powers. That is why many countries are concentrating all their national capacities to achieve any one of these three factors. From now on, I will talk about the case of Korea. Korea has digital technologies and manufacturing capabilities, such as semiconductors, batteries, shipbuilding, and steel. Korea is characterized by a complementary industrial structure that does not directly compete with American industries. But Korea still lacks industrial design capabilities. In addition, Korea's high-tech industry supply chain has close relationship with the United States, China, and Japan. So the situation in Korea is very complex, and it is not easy to respond to the new GVC supply chain reorganization order. Of course, Korea is also pursuing various policies to secure technological sovereignty. In December last year, 10 essential critical technologies were selected in consideration in economic and supply chain, security, and a new industrial environment, such as the recent war in industrial and now in consideration in changes in the global security environments, such as the recent war in Ukraine. We are supplementing our national critical technologies with 10 plus alpha. In order to promote the selected critical technology as mission-oriented R&D, specific tasks and goals to be achieved within the given time will be set. And not only R&D, but also comprehensive support measures such as policies, systems, human resource development, and international cooperation will be prepared. In addition, the National Advanced Strategy Industry Act was enacted to foster and protect competitive industry in the supply chain, and also special laws to foster and support national critical technology were proposed. Finally, it should not be overlooked that there are risks behind technological sovereignty in economic security. Since the strategic industrial sector is an international division of labor in which many countries and companies are intertwined, such as raw materials, parts, equipment, and intermediate goods. Artificial and short-term blockization by technology hegemony can pose many risks. For example, as the technical difficulty of semiconductors increases, it is impossible for a specific company to solve all problems alone. and a global collaborative ecosystem is essential. Without mutual cooperation between semiconductor design, materials, parts, equipment, and manufacturing companies, it is impossible to respond to the advanced process era represented by 3 nanometers or less. No single country can develop or produce all technologies, so we must avoid the temptation of a self-sufficient economy. It is also necessary to review the robustness and sustainability of this temporary alliance system, high cost and closed system that replace traditional technology sharing and open low-cost supply chains are not sustainable and could be restructured at any time through renegotiation. For this reason, I wish all countries would consider mid to long-term sustainability at this time, as well as short-term responses to TS, secure TS. Rather, it may be necessary to secure TS and economic security in the direction of maximizing mutual benefits under a more drastic openness and expanded alliance. Also, it is important for countries and companies to secure adaptability and resilience in this time of rapid change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hwang, for raising very important and specific comment. So let's do it this way. In the first round, we'll have a discussion among panelists. After that, we'll be open for floor question and interaction with the floor people. Okay. So in the first round, I'll give you each speakers for about 5 minutes or so, in any way of responding to the comment from predetermined comment by Dr. Hwang, or any thing you can respond to from other speakers' presentation. I think at least Jacob Adler might have something to say in response to the next 5 points raised. Okay. Okay. So let me start from Jacob.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much for your comments. Very, very insightful. Well, I don't know how to start. Maybe I start with your questions. How long will it last? Well, you expect an answer now, don't you? Of course, no one knows how long it lasts. We really do not know if there's a new balance where both the US and China can live with the status quo that they find in a couple of years. I can't predict. But what we may underestimate, and I think Bill has made the point really nicely, is the power of internal politics. It's as simple as that. Certain things are done for internal audiences that have potentially catastrophic or very detrimental effects on the international scale. And that is nothing we can predict. We don't know who wins the next US election. We don't know after the party summit in China that we have, I think, this month, how stable that government is and what it means for Taiwan in a couple of years. We just don't know. So I really cannot give you a proper answer. My answer would be, don't monitor closely what's happened for national policy. And that's maybe something I would also comment to Nick. I was confused, and it has to do with the national policy. I was a bit confused. You very strongly looked at competitiveness and neglected what you saw as main driver, which is this gap in income and development chances in society. That is not only, but also due to manufacturing going down. While you said, well, in absolute terms, manufacturing was stable, it's just in relative terms it went down. So I was slightly confused because I was rather convinced about that argument that then had all the kinds of implications as to bringing manufacturing back, bringing good jobs back, America first, and that we know all that. So maybe would like to comment on that because I think that has been a major driver. So to make predictions, especially for the future, are very, very tricky, but don't forget the internal dimension. And then what shall I recommend to Korea? Well, what can I say? I think a couple of speakers have made very clear how tricky your situation is, being sandwiched not only between US and China, but also having all kinds of historical baggage, but now also recent conflicts that I actually wasn't aware that much. So thank you very much for your presentation. So you are in a very difficult situation. There is certainly no easy solution, certainly not from my side. But some of the things I've heard, I find go in the right direction, which is, for example, this analytical capability, monitoring to better understand your own system, to better understand the complementarities with other like-minded countries, whatever like-minded means these days, but like-minded countries, going for alliances that go not only US or not, but think about countries like my own or the European Union. I think there's a lot to gain with international collaboration that is much more explicit and much more strategic and based on analysis of complementarities. I think JD might say something about that if I'm not mistaken from what we discussed yesterday. So that for me is the way forward. When I see the Japanese case, I would hope that in 5 years the country has a system where you are more redundant, where you have more diversity in how you source your critical inputs. If the reliance on Japan is so strong, question is that something that should go on, or should you have supply systems that are more diverse and where you have resilience and redundancies inbuilt, so you are not one-sided structurally dependent, you have a second or a third supplier. I mean, of course, that's in the ideal world, I understand that, but that would be part of the monitoring system. And then, of course, I'm fully on your side, Nick, although I never thought that you are more wishful thinking than I am, that we can create international world order that is worthy of its name and it's rule-based. So, of course, Korea as a country would have to support all developments at all levels that bring rules back to the international table. Now, of course, you can say Korea, small country, no influence, of course, but we have to continue to try and to find alliances to maybe rebuild other organizations. So I'm with you, but the analogy to the European Union experience I would not make, because this is really a historic case that's so unique in terms of why we went into this interdependence, and it's much more than only rules. It's joint decision-making that is really tricky, and on a transnational scale beyond Europe, I don't see that kind of system. So these are the couple of comments on Korea. And I have more to other speakers, but I might do that later.
Next.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. The how long, yes, we don't know. Although I am not, to tell you the truth, I'm never shy to say my opinions on things. Let me tell you, I'm not very optimistic on China. Let me put it this way: I'm on the pessimist of China. And the reason is that I was hoping that they will move forward, but it seems to me that they're moving backwards. It seems to me that they're closing up. I may be wrong, but so how long it will last? It will last for a while. Obviously, countries like Korea are facing big problems for the reasons that we just heard. You are sandwiched between two elephants, or more than two, perhaps. But what Jakob just mentioned should be taken very seriously. A very important role for all these countries like Korea is to push the majors to go for international rules. I mean, you have votes, international votes. There is places where we meet, and if you keep saying to the majors that this is going out of control, in fact, you will be surprised how much the majors need you. You think they don't need you, but they do. And thus, Bill said it already, and I totally agree. There is no country that and others, of course, other speakers, that can do everything on their own. We need collaboration. Simply now we are uncertain about who is who and where. So it's a risk management thing. I am also convinced that this resilience business with a global value chain is going to increase risks a lot and increase costs a lot. I mean, the system that we built after World War II really benefited a lot of people. It created trouble, as Bill said, this bifurcation of incomes in the United States that has led to the political crisis more recently is real. But we don't need to dismantle an international system to fix that. I mean, there are other ways of doing it, I think. And European countries, again, may have some lessons in that respect. Korea, for a little while, will muddle through, but I think the sides that it will take are sort of fairly clear, particularly if China is moving this direction of pretty much autarky. It seems to me that China wants to be to achieve autarky in everything, and at that point, it's going to face problems. It's I think, and that's it. I will stop here.
Thank you, Park Sang-wook. Professor Park.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comment and questions, Dr. Hwang. World has changed, and I think it will never go back. Some people in Korea says security, the U.S., economy, economy, China. In Korean words, 안미 경중. That mention does not make any sense, and I am very strongly against to that, because Korea's industrial development was made by the U.S. technologies, and so there is no choice but to merge into the innovation system of the U.S. I may say the blocked system of innovation instead of national system of innovation. In old days, Korean firms produce things out of the American technologies. However, Korea cannot do the same role as a kind of a manufacturing satellite of the U.S. economy, because Samsung Electronics and Hynix need to produce semiconductors in the American territory, and Hyundai Motor Company needs to produce electric vehicles in the U.S. territory. So I think there is no choice but to merge two economies, and we don't have the right to choose China, because Korean industries heavily depend on the American technologies. On the other hand, Korea is not a country that can pursue technology supremacy. So Korea needs to build a friendly network with countries that face similar situation, for instance, Germany. So I believe that is the reason we have two distinguished scholars from the U.S. and Germany in this session, because Korea needs to merge into U.S. system, and Korea needs to build a strong collaboration network for technology sovereignty with Germany, or maybe France or Italy afterwards. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess this issue of how long this situation will last, it's difficult to say, but at least in terms of the size of U.S. China economic size or GDP, in next decade, 2030, the China GDP will be close to U.S. That's almost certain. But that does not end of this debate, this race, because China facing rapid aging, whereas US is not. US keep receiving the immigration and so in the longer term forecast is that US will become again bigger than China GDP. That means what? That means in the next several decades, we'll have two big countries, almost similar size, competing each other. So we hope that this rivalry does not lead to too much chaos or destruction, but rather they would coexist in a more predictable way under new global governance. That's why we have to work harder to realize that goal. That means we need a new global governance so that we don't keep living G2. G2 means group of two, they are collaborating. But we don't want S2, S means split. They are split too. We don't want to have to split too. So I think that's important challenge facing all countries around the world, I think, yeah. Okay. So let's take any comment, feedback from floors. Yeah. Anwar from World Bank office in Korea. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been super interesting since the morning. I have two questions, basically, which I noticed that there are two voices kind of missing from the discussion that we've heard so far. And they fill into that clearing the divide between the perception and the reality that Nick highlighted, because I think one key role for this group in this room is to clarify a lot of the misconceptions, because there's a lot of misconceptions. So the first voice is the voice of the private companies, the multinationals, the business sector, which were the prime winners of all of this era for the last, I don't know how many years. They have been the prime winners of the globalization and trade and the lack of sovereignty and all of the efficiencies gained. What do these companies think of all those calls for sovereignty? Yes, they benefit from the few subsidies and from all the publicity, but this is peanuts in terms of what they have gained in efficiencies and access to markets and access to talent and access to technologies at the same time. So I don't know if anybody from the panelists have talked to these companies to know what they really think. A few weeks ago, we had SK Hynix and Qualcomm talk to us, the chief economist, and they both insisted that there is no way a single company could produce semiconductors on their own. Collaboration is the key to the game, access and, you know, all the things that we know, but are those voices heard? So this is point number one. Point number two is the voice of emerging economies or catching up economies. I mean, we're in Korea, and we know what key role technology does for catch up. So what are the implications of all these themes of technology sovereignty in terms of access to knowledge to these countries? And I'm talking both ways. Inbound, where countries get this knowledge to develop and catch up, but also outbound, because all of these rich countries have benefited a lot from the inbound of talent. All the technologies, and the leading countries have benefited a lot from the access to talent, and this is the one of the key aspects of the technology sovereignty is being able to attract more talent. So is it going to be one window open and one door closed in terms of those access? What are the implications, and what can we also clarify in terms of these concepts?
Thank you. Excellent point from Anwar World Bank office in Korea, Incheon. So he talked about two missing voices or actors. One is the private sector's interest voices. Second is the interest voice of emerging countries or developing countries. So we'd like to hear from this speakers panel. But before that, any, J.D. Lee? Yes.
As Professor Bong indicated, the combination of nationalism and technology sovereignty concept has become so dangerous, and always, as Jacob indicated also, the internal politics is always a problem. So in that sense, we can say that the technology sovereignty concept has been partly contaminated. So is there any maybe kind of idea to replace the wording of technology sovereignty by some other things that may be even captured or so bought by normal politicians, not nationalists.
Yeah, that's right. This concept of sovereignty is first proposed by Jacob, but now it is out of his control. So that's the problem. So I have to hear of you. Any? Yes, please. Okay. Give him mic.
My name is Jeong-Dong from Stepi. I do have some observation in South Korean policy makings, also some comment or questions. Observation is like that. One is that like a war mentality is the dominating South Korean policy makings. We do experience Korean War, but we take this situation like live or die. Too serious, I mean. So instead of the cooperation, you choose the side and then put together. That's what I'm thinking of the policymakers at the moment. Secondly, there are tendencies to rent-seeking of the current dominant player in private sector or public sectors. They pushed their agenda onto the government policy agenda, like semiconductor, other things. But something like who else to push up promoting some biotech or environmental tech, something like that. Only we choose the ICT manufacturing on the South Korean context policy making. So I doubt about the rent seeking about current dominant players. And then thirdly, instead of choosing more creative policy making, they stick to the old success story, more government-driven top-down ways, old ways of the committees and something like that. So there was little room to experiment new policy makings while diversifying the policy instrument, mixing something like that. So I guess it's dangerous for colors in the South Korean context. And that's my observation at the moment. And then my question is that, or comment is like that, we do currently do surveying semiconductor industry, but many stakeholders says that we do underestimate Chinese capabilities. Is that Professor Kilney says that in the coming 2 or 3 decades, China will be rivaled with the United States. But also, China is quite good at new area of the environmental technologies. They could have wind farms and then also AI. So even though they do have some internal problems like aging or disparity in the societies, but they are quite good at or rivaled with the United States for a long time. That means they're quite a trouble to South Korea. Also, it's dangerous to choose the side at the moment. We have to see more longer term and try to be more flexible is the right way to go. In addition to that, as the Amara says, that private company, if you talk, they do not want to choose the side. Under the bottom, there are a lot of collaborations in terms of science and research, also trade, something like that. So even though on the surface there is some division between the United States and China, but under the surface, especially in the private sector, I believe there are more collaborations, more trade. So do not misunderstand only seeing the surface. We have to go deeper than what is happening in the field. I mean, that's what the South Korea have to choose or deeper insight to understand it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Park from STEPI, raising important issue from Korean perspective. He is the one who are in charge of this OECD review of Korea's science and technology system. So he knows what's going on behind the surface in Korean industrial system. So with that, let's turn to each speakers to respond whatever point you think you are relevant, interesting to you. Okay. Maybe again starting from Jacob. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, very interesting points. Thank you very much for that. We have 12 minutes left. That's not enough for a deep discussion. So I will be selective. Voice of private companies, that's of course an absolutely critical point. So you talk to companies, and we've talked to companies, and I've followed the discussion, and I talked about this, you know, the Science Summit in Germany, where we had 3 CEOs in BioNTech and BASF and one more, so real powerhouses. And they were fully aware of this issue. And of course, they know in the perfect economic world of that Nick would like to see out there, they have gained a lot from the International Division of Labor. Obviously, that's absolutely no question. But they now realize, certainly, and that's the German discussion now, the danger of China. So they realize, of course, all these inefficiencies of now disrupting, but there's a strong discussion within industry that they now have to change their value chains. They have to change them. They know that. And they are now starting to pull out of China. Of course, they want to see it still as a market, but there's a lot of caution to go into China. And now we have an overlapping discussion, but it's mutually influential, which is the energy dependency. So German situation, companies realize that we have been dependent on the US on security, dependent on in trade in terms of China in many sectors, especially more automotive, and dependent on energy on Russia. Germany. So our sovereignty discussion is really very hot now in a real sense, turning into a cold winter. So companies have realized that we cannot play that game any longer, to just try to get the best out of the global system without having resilience inbuilt. So companies now are part of the technology sovereignty debate. They are part of this council that I was talking about, and they realize that they need redundancies, resilience, and backshoring and capabilities internally again. So companies are heard. In the ideal world, they hate this discussion, but they realize they have to face it up. In terms of developing countries, I'm totally with you, and they are not here now, but clearly that is a debate we have to have. They are not really reflected in our concept because it has a bit of a different audience. What I can say in terms of the energy dependency debate and the debate on sourcing energy in the future, there is a strong awareness in Germany that we cannot play the energy dependency game now by taking advantage of all these developing countries. We have a lot of sun, and you will deliver all of that without thinking about what is in it for them. So this will be inbuilt. I mean, I'm confident, and we are advising the government on energy policy very, very strongly. We have 70 people working on this in my institute only on energy policy. So we are very strong in making sure that we don't create a situation where we now exploit and create one-sided structural dependencies for them. So it must be a two-sided game. And maybe one remark, and then I stop. JD, and also too much praise or too much honor for us. We have not invented this term. We have reacted, and maybe poorly, but we have reacted to this term being captured by people who define it in the nationalist kind of approach. So our attempt was to say, yes, technology sovereignty is out there as a concern, and I think we have to take it serious. I mean, you in Korea, you have this debate. It is there. Now, you can leave it to other people to use that term the way they want, and you can try to create another term that no one will actually listen to, or you can try to recapture the term and define it the way you think it should be defined, and I'm prepared to fight that fight. If we are not successful, JD, give me a better term, and I'm happy to. I'm not married to this term.
Thank you. Nick.
Very good, because I worry also about the sovereignty, the part of the definition. So perhaps some other word is good. Now, to Anwar, totally agree also about companies. I mean, one thing, companies love risk in the old definition of risk and uncertainty. They hate uncertainty, and what we are doing right now is actually to increase the uncertainty for them. So on the face of it, they hate this, what's going on, because as you said, some subsidies are peanuts actually compared to what they may lose around the world. On the other hand, as Jacob said, if they are part of the discussion and they realize that this is a serious issue and they might go along, what I want to say to Jakob is that Germany always has had a special relationship with its companies. I'm not sure we do in the United States. Somehow you manage to have strong manufacturing in Germany, you manage to have strong negotiations between labor and industry. Industry has not left, is there. I'm not sure this will work with everyone. To the comments from Mr. Park, Dr. Park, I worry terribly about the rent seeking. And that's why I am very careful with this, because this is a real danger, that the powerful players actually will exploit this. It's a game, right? Absolutely, I worry. I also like your idea that we may be thinking inside the box, and perhaps we should think outside the box a little bit with new approaches to policy. And that my best way of saying this is that we may want to restructure the system a little bit because it's outdated. It comes from an era where one superpower was dealing the cards. Now there are many, it's a multi world. As for China, I would be much more optimistic on China if it had defined its own way of developing. For example, if they achieve the green growth path to development, if they become green actually, and they manage to implement a green growth, then they will be super. There are other countries that are seemingly defining different ways of growth. India, in fact, I am looking at India. India is going in the direction of this frugal innovation, and that to me sounds like a winner in a world that most people are poor. So India has a concept. If China also managed to go with that other concept, the green growth, and teach us how to grow this way, then China is a winner. I am afraid we, the old industrial powers, that is, do not know how to grow in a green way. This was not our way. It was the dirty way. So if somebody new comes and show us, it will be great, and they will lead. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacob, now or after Park? Oh, okay. Perhaps Park.
Thank you. I'd like to respond to 2 questions. The first one is about the implications to developing countries about the TS concept. In my opinion, in reality, developing countries or emerging economies do not need to worry about the TS seriously because they don't have it at all, unfortunately. So the technology sovereignty concern is only for developed countries. Developing countries do not have proper STI policies. It is very unfortunate, however. And the second question or comment from Dr. Park Byung-won, I think rent seeking is too strong terminology here. However, I'd like to say they are taking advantage of their situation. But I'm not that pessimistic about the future and the role of the technology sovereignty concept, because the TS concept provides the state with a new rationale for innovation policy, which we still need for respond to the poverty, climate change, welfare, health, and so on. So why don't we have a new rationale? The kind of task is upon the scholars like us, innovation policy scholars. We have kind of obligation to use the term in the real world for the positive and constructive policies, not to blame the concept of technology sovereignty. Thank you.
Thank you. We are about to wrap up, but before that, Jacob has last. Okay. This one first? Okay. Okay. Please be short.
네. 그 앞에 제가 이제 처음에 질문을 드렸을 때 이제 이런 좀 불안정한 상황이 언제까지 지속될 것인가를 질문을 드렸는데, 그 아마 이제 지금 현재 이 상황은 굉장히 그 불안정하고 또 비용이 많이 들어가고 이런 상황이기 때문에 뭐 상당히 지속하기는 어려울 것 아닌가라는 생각이 들고, 아마 바이든 대통령 이번 중간 선거 끝나고 아니면 뭐 다음 대통령이 선출이 되고 중국도 아마 그 시진핑 3기 이후라든지 좀 장기적으로는 아마 조금 더 좀 세계적으로 좀 받아들일 수 있는 그런 범위 내에서 뭔가 좀 안정적인 어떤 그런 체계가 잡힐 것이 아닌가 생각을 하고 있고요. 그 앞에 그 월드뱅크에 계신 분이 질문했듯이 이제 신흥국이나 추격 국가들에 대한 뭐 대응도 뭐 이제 오늘 논의에서는 뭐 빠졌는데, 사실은 각국마다 굉장히 상황이 다 다르기 때문에 그 이런 여러 가지 세계적으로 이제 바뀌는 환경에서 아마 각국은 각국 나름대로의 그런 대응책을 마련해서 이제 아마 대응을 하고 있지 않은가 이렇게 생각을 하고 있고요. 그 과거에 한중일의 사례를 보더라도 한국, 중국, 일본은 지금부터 한 10년, 15년 전에 세계의 제조 그 공급망의 주도적 역할을 했고, 삼국은 굉장히 서로 분업 체계 속에서 상호 윈윈하는 이런 그 관계 속에서 역할을 다 가졌습니다. 그런데 이제 중국이 부상하고 일본이 좀 장기 침체를 하고 있고, 이런 것 속에서 이제 상당히 삼국의 어떤 역할과 이런 부분이 많이 바뀌었죠. 우리나라도 제조 공정 강국이지만 지금 현재는 그 제조 설계 산업 설계 쪽으로 이제 상당히 관심을 가지고 있고 그쪽으로도 집중하려고 하고 있습니다. 그래서 이런 여러 가지 상황 변화 속에서도 각국은 자국의 어떤 그런 여러 가지 상황을 반영해 가지고 대응을 할 것이고, 결국은 앞에 말씀드렸듯이 이런 불안정한 상황이 앞으로는 어느 순간에는 분명히 좀 안정적이고 이렇게 될 것이기 때문에 좀 그 앞에 우리 그 발표자들께서도 말씀하셨지만 국제적인 기준 이런 부분을 좀 그 새로운 어떤 그런 기준 이런 부분을 같이 쉐어링할 수 있는, 같이 윈윈할 수 있는, 같이 포용할 수 있는 이런 기준들을 세우고, 그리고 이제 우리가 협력할 수밖에 없는 이런 국제 협력이라든지 기업들 간의 어떤 상호 협력, 이런 부분이 좀 더 이런 부분을 활성화하기 위한 노력들 속에서 아마 좀 이런 불안정한 상황도 조금 더 앞당겨지지 않을까 이렇게 생각합니다.
네, thank you. 네, Jacob, you have a last word. Okay.
Very much. There's one remark I wanted to make, and I forgot to the World Bank colleague, because you said companies cannot do it on their own. And just want to give you one example of technology sovereignty policy in Europe and in Germany that I have not mentioned yet, but I think that is really important. I'm not sure if Korea could replicate it, because maybe it's too small. But anyway, which is industrial projects of common European interest. I don't know if you know about those. These are European approaches where we bundle a lot of money around certain technology. At the moment, we have two examples are in battery, where Europe bundles money. In one case, it's 10 countries. In another, I think it's 12 countries. I'm not quite sure. Bundles a lot of money to do R&D, even basic R&D, and then go down until the first deployment. So it's a real industrial innovation policy. So it's more industrial policy than it is innovation policy, but there are a lot of R&D involved. But they bring together all kinds of actors. In Germany, we have done the same thing now, 680 million to bring together the research competencies of Germany, all relevant research competencies, and we build up a factory that is now trying to develop ideas of how to manufacture a new generation of batteries and then do the first deployment, and then industry takes over. So Germany wants not to be autark, but it wants to be able to develop their own battery competencies in a concerted effort that is unheard of. That's an industrial policy like the French did in the 70s, Germany is now doing. That has been designed before we had the label technology sovereignty at Fraunhofer ISI, but it's clearly going in that kind of direction. Maybe as a last word, because I think we talk too much on competitiveness only, but at least in Germany, the discussion is very much about values as well. So independence in terms of sovereignty, in our understanding, has also to do with we want to live in societies that we can define ourselves, and we don't want to live in societies where there is a pervasive IT and software and platform industry that is dictated by either China or the US with a value system that might not be the German one or the European one. And so sovereignty has much to do with values as it has with competitiveness.
Thank you. Okay. So we have spent almost 2 hours to discuss these exciting issues. And some of us mentioned the term sandwich to describe Korean position. But there another term describe Korean position is that nutcracker. I think sandwich is much better than being in the nutcracker, because nutcracker you are crushed to death, right? But sandwich is good as long as you are making the inside stuff, which is most important thing in sandwich. It's better than to be a piece of bread surrounding sandwich inside. Okay, but problem is that now US saying that we are making the same stuff inside, but Korean want to keep doing our role as making the core stuff inside sandwich. Okay, that's our concern, I guess. Okay, with that, let's end this session. Thank you very much.